joining me on how to choose cosmetic surfactants. I've got to say, this is such a big topic. When I was preparing what I was going to present in this particular live, I had two topics scheduled, and then I started to write down a few summary notes of how to choose cosmetic surfactants. And I really thought, you know what, you guys are going to have so many questions, and it's such a big topic to try and cover in a 1 hour live session. So we're focusing on cosmetic surfactants, and that is just so that I can give you some really good insight with what little time we have. Of course, this is a really big topic, so if you're looking to formulate professionally, then we definitely do recommend more professional study for more detailed learning. But today we're still going to go through some really key principles that you need to know when you're choosing your cosmetic surfactants. Just a little bit of background about IPCS. If you're not that familiar with us, we've always been online training, and we continue to always be online training. So you can study with us no matter where you are in the world. You can access your lectures and learning materials any time of day or night. And we have real cosmetic chemists and brand managers to support you with your training, whether you're studying formulation science with us or whether you're studying brand management with us. We are also industry and internationally recognized. So we do have a link. This presentation today with all of the surfactant information is available in our Dropbox. We have a Dropbox link where you can access all of our free formulas and our free reports. If you don't already have this link, please email us info@personalcarescience.com.au, and we can give you that link, and you can access every single one of our reports, formulas for our videos, including the presentation I'm going to show you today. I do have a couple of hyperlinks in this presentation just so that you can see our credibility and professionalism. Again, you can go to the International Federation for Society of Cosmetic Chemists website, and you will see our course listed there. So again, we do have that industry recognized qualification, and of course we are government audited and recognized, and we have that link there as well for you. We do have several trainers on board. As I've mentioned, we're all cosmetic chemists, and we do have a brand manager who is, again, a fully bachelor qualified marketing manager that can give you advice with your cosmetic brand management as well. So we have the formulation science, cosmetic formulation training programs. We have our brand management training programs, and we also have regulatory affairs for cosmetic training programs. So you are dealing with professionals when you study with us that can give you real world advice. And just as a friendly reminder that our courses are all professional level, you do get a proper recognised cosmetic qualification with our Diploma of Personal Care Formulation. This is a study course that will take 1,200 hours. There's no shortcutting it. Please don't ask, because it is a professional program. It is industry recognised. So again, please don't compare us with other workshops or other courses out there where they might be 100 hours or less, because what you learn with our diploma is so much, much more than you can possibly learn in a 100-hour program. And again, you can go to our website and have a look at all the online and extra features you get when you study with us, including professional texts and a load of practical activities, especially with the formulation programs. Even with our brand management programs, we have a lot of real world scenarios for you incorporated in the programs, and even your assessments are real world examples. So you are getting input on your real world examples from our professionals. So I've told you it's a big topic. Let's get straight into it. How to choose surfactants. Well, let's just cover off on a little bit of surfactant chemistry 101 to begin with. The first thing I want to just point out is, what are surfactants? The name actually comes from, it's a surface active agent. Now, the actual branch of chemistry that covers surfactants is huge. It actually covers your solubilizing materials, the materials that make things foam and create bubbles. It even covers your superfatting agents, and it even covers your emulsifiers. Technically, a surfactant, chemically speaking, is a substance that has a water-loving portion and an oil-loving portion. And anytime there's a material that has a water-loving portion and an oil-loving portion, it's a surfactant. Now, with a cosmetic chemist and in our industry, when you are talking to a cosmetic chemist and you say surfactants, we are talking about the materials that create bubbles and foam. When you are talking with a chemist from any generalized chemistry background, when you say surfactants, they will include all of these other branches of surfactant science. But again, if you're talking to a cosmetic chemist, if you want to start discussing the branch of surfactants that deals with emulsions, for example, you would call them emulsifiers. But they are still technically, chemically, surfactants. They still have a water-loving and an oil-loving portion. So again, just to clarify, for those of you who maybe don't have a strong chemistry background, don't worry, I'm not going to scare you with the science. I'm going to make it real. It's all about choosing surfactants for your cosmetic formulas. And even those of you who do have a bachelor in chemistry or similar qualification, and if you've ever been wondering, how do we interchange or use this terminology as cosmetic chemists? That is how cosmetic chemists use the terminology relevant to the materials that we want to select for our formulas. So when we are picking materials to create foaming products, we will call them surfactants. When we are trying to create an emulsion or a cream or a lotion, we will call those particular surfactants, we will call them emulsifiers. And of course, I'm going to introduce you to the term of what a superfatting agent is in just a moment. And again, if you're not that familiar with chemistry or science, please don't be scared. I'll make it super easy for you. And of course, then we also have this other classification, which, again, if a chemist hasn't been introduced into our field, may not recognize the term solubilizer the way we do. Basically, a solubilizer is a substance that is able to solubilize an oil-based material within a high continuous water phase, such that it becomes transparent or you don't even see it, and it remains completely stable over a very prolonged period of time. And again, it's just another surfactant, chemically speaking, but we call those materials solubilizers. And again, if you're new to the chemistry side of things, these are the materials that you use when you're creating your hydrating mists or toners. And that's how we solubilize a little bit of fragrant oil or a little bit of oil in an otherwise transparent water, mostly water based product. And again, these are the terms we use to describe the different materials that will provide this functionality. But chemically, these are all surfactant materials. So again, this is how I'm going to be segregating it for you. And this is when you're speaking with raw material suppliers, you would use the same terminology. They would present materials to you, splitting them out into their categories based on the types of products that each of the materials get used in and their functionality within a cosmetic formula. So again, hopefully that gives you a little bit of background. And again, even if you've been reading documents and you see these terms used interchangeably, that's why. Chemically, again, they're all technically surfactants, but what they do in a formula, a cosmetic chemist will then reclassify or subclassify these materials based on what they do in that formula. So how do we choose different surfactants? So today's presentation, I'm really looking at how do we choose surfactants to create different types of foaming formulas? Why do we pick certain materials over others? Why do we use combinations of these materials together? Well, the number one reason we use combinations of these materials together is so that we can have a really mild, pleasant feeling, high performing, high foaming product. And we couldn't achieve this if we were to use just one type of surfactant, or we might need to combine it with other materials to improve its skin feel or its foamability. So for example, again, another way of classifying surfactants, and this even gets used with classifying certain emulsifiers, is by charge. So we have what are known as anionic surfactants. These are negatively charged surfactants, and these actually generally provide the strongest clean, and they do that clean through charge repulsion, so it's quite an effective clean, and they also tend to foam the best. We have non-ionic surfactants. These have no overall charge. These are definitely more mild than your anionic surfactants, so that's one reason why you'll often see a combination of the two in a formula, because using a non-ionic surfactant with an anionic surfactant will greatly improve the mildness of a formulation. And then we also have amphoteric charge, and these have a positive charge in an acidic environment and a negative charge in an alkaline environment. Now, don't get confused here. There's a couple of terms that I'm needing to introduce to give you a bit of a 101, and you'll hear me say later that you can't put a cationic surfactant with an anionic surfactant. but that doesn't mean you can't put an amphoteric surfactant in an acidic environment. Even though it has its positive charge, it is still compatible with an anionic surfactant. And again, that's because the chemistries are different. Without getting too complicated about it, let's just stick to these larger categories: anionic, non-ionic, amphoteric. And definitely amphoterics go extremely well with anionic materials to, again, boost foam, improve mildness, improve the clean, and they can, with certain types of anionic surfactants, help boost the viscosity of the product. So we use combinations, and ideally, one of the best combinations you can have in a body wash, face wash, shampoo, definitely, is a combination of these three. Generally, you'd have one or two anionic materials, usually used in small proportions, but they tend to be more effective with their cleansing and foaming power. Then we would usually put in one or two non-ionic materials. This helps boost the mildness of the product specifically, and in some cases can be used to help manipulate the feeling of the product. And I will discuss this a little bit more in a coming slide. And definitely, even in a budget product, you tend to see at least an anionic and an amphoteric material. And again, the amphoteric material greatly boosts the mildness of the anionic material. So again, very, very budget products, you would see anionic and amphoteric at the very least. Where you can afford it, you would see anionic, non-ionic, amphoteric, and where the product does have a really beautiful premium feel, premium foam, premium performance, and the budget allows it, you would tend to see one to two anionics. You definitely see two, maybe three non-ionics, because they help with some of those aesthetic properties and wash off after feel and even performance. And you definitely see an amphoteric as well, along with some other things that we can put in formulas, but I'll cover that in a little moment. But that is why we usually have a combination. If we were to just use anionic materials, while it would foam well and clean well, it would be so harsh on our skin. In fact, this is actually where sodium lauryl sulfate's got its very poor reputation from, because, if you're using an industrial cleaner, for example, to keep it really cheap, high performance, super great clean on grease on your driveway, they'd just use sodium lauryl sulfate. Unfortunately, too many companies or consumers just instantly then think, oh, sodium lauryl sulfate's extremely harsh, it can remove grease from my driveway, it must be bad for me. But we don't use it on its own, and we certainly don't use it in the same sort of proportions. So it's incorrect to think that the sodium lauryl sulfate you use to clean oil and grease off your driveway is used in the same way that we use it in foaming products. But definitely, this is where some of that bad reputation came from. But it's definitely not how we use it in personal care products. We wouldn't use any anionic material on its own. It would be irritating, even if it was completely natural. It would be irritating on its own. So we use it with a combination of other materials to improve the mildness. We only need a small amount of that anionic for its fantastic performance, and then we would use more of the amphoteric and some of the non-ionic materials. Again, choices of the non-ionic materials do tend to be a bit budget driven, but they can really enhance the performance and skin feel of the product. So how to choose the surfactants and combinations. So what I've just talked about, the combinations there, again, I've got on this slide for you here, and I've got some examples. So at least, even in a really budget product, you would have anionic and amphoteric. And the most common example is sodium lauryl sulfate with cocamidopropylbutane. This combination is used because the cocamidopropylbutane helps thicken the sodium lauryl sulfate. You don't want a product that just runs out of the hand. Consumers need it to last in the hand while they apply it. It's also a mark of quality. They want to see a bit of a gel type product. These two materials are also quite readily sourceable. You can get them quite readily, and they're quite cheap. Now, I will tell you, you can create a product mild enough to use on babies using sodium lauryl sulfate if you combine it in the right way with other amphoteric and non-ionic materials. So again, this is just an example of how sodium lauryl sulfate's got its bad name because, hey, it's a fantastic degreasing agent when you use it in high quantities and even when it's used on its own, but we would not put a driveway cleaning product on our bodies or our hair. It would feel horrible. But they use sodium lauryl sulfate because it works so well. So when we use it in formulas, we only need tiny amounts because it works so well. And when we pair it with other materials, mildness additives like cocamidopropylbutane or other non-ionic materials, it's perfectly fine and suitable to use, even on babies. because we're combining it in a way that makes it safe and suitable for its intended purpose. When it's not as budget conscious, it's ideal to have one anionic, one amphoteric, and at least one or two non-ionic materials. Again, you may find, and even after this presentation, have a look at your body wash, have a look at your shampoos, and you'll see that these combinations are used. And they're used, again, because it boosts the mildness, it boosts the performance, it boosts the cleansing power, and it just means you've got this beautiful product you can give your consumer. So I've got an example there: sodium lauryl sarcosinate, cocamata propyl hydroxysultane, glycol stearate. I've picked some key inky names that are commonly used, just so you can get familiar with, how do we use these? How have other companies combined these materials? So you can see it in a real world application. Here, sodium lauryl sarcosinate, again, it's an anionic material. It is an amino acid based material. So it is quite mild out of the anionic materials, but still anionic surfactants are, you need to reduce the irritancy with non-ionic or amphoteric materials as a blend. You wouldn't just use it on its own. In this case, cocamata propyl hydroxysultane, incredible mildness here. This one tends to get used in a lot of sensitive skincare products or baby products. It's even milder than cocamata propyl betaine. So again, we might use a combination there to suit your specific product type or need of your target market. And that's another influencing factor when we're picking different blends. And glycol stearate, that is the material that makes that nice pearly look in your product. So again, I've used it as an example. It is non-ionic, and that tends to get used as a pearlizing agent. So you'll probably see that in a product if you've got a pearly looking shampoo or body wash at home. Now, when we're talking about a more superior feeling product, we can use the more expensive types of anionic and non-ionic materials. I've got an example here: sodium methyl cocoyl taurate. I really, really love this anionic surfactant. It is used in a lot of your salon quality hair care. The foam on this it's such a dense foam. It performs like sodium lauryl sulfate, but it's about 10 times the price. But it feels beautiful. It washes off beautiful. It's got a beautiful dense foam. But again, you'll tend to see it in more salon products because it does work beautifully. It's definitely not as harsh as sodium lauryl sulfate, but its performance is really great. And again, I've used some common inky names just so you feel a little bit more comfortable with the selections and how the combinations are put together. I also have here PEG 60 almond glycerides. So you often see a lot of non-ionic materials with a PEG in front of it, and they're ethoxylated because almond glycerides is basically from almond oil, and that's oil loving. And remember, I said that this is a superfatting agent. So superfatting agents also fall under that umbrella. Remember back from this very first slide, superfatting agents fall under the umbrella of surfactants. They're still considered a surfactant. So what we do is we get the almond glycerides, that's the oil-loving portion, and it's ethoxylated, and that's your PEG portion. So that's water-loving. So oil-loving, water-loving, it becomes technically, chemically, a surfactant. But it's called a superfatting agent because it provides this beautiful skin feel from the almond glycerides, but it then can be washed off because of its water-loving portion as well. So you don't end up with this greasy afterfeel. It also doesn't impact your formulation stability. I do have a good slide to show this. I think pictures work really, really well when explaining some of these concepts. I will show you that in a moment. So I do want to just clarify for people here as well, there is nothing wrong with PEGs either. They've also got an undeservedly bad rap on the internet. Ethoxylated materials, years and years and years ago, I'm talking like 1970s, probably before, ethoxylated materials did have traces of a now banned substance called 1,4-dioxane. And this 1,4-dioxane became present as part of the ethoxylation process. But I do want to point out that 1,4-dioxane is now prohibited in cosmetic products. So any ethoxylated cosmetic ingredient, any of those materials with PEG, for example, need to show that their 1,4-dioxane content is below the prohibited regulatory limits. So again, we don't have this traces. We don't even have traces of that material there that it's going to cause any sort of health or harm issues now. But again, this is where they got a little bit of that bad rap. Also, from a consumer perspective, they see numbers and letters like this on a label, and unfortunately, with the fear mongering that's out there today about cosmetic chemicals, they look at that and they think, oh, this is a chemical. It's not natural. It's not good for me. But you will often see these on labels where the product promotes that it might be, from a marketing perspective, the product contains almond oil, which really isn't the full truth. It contains an ingredient derived from almond oil, but of course it has been ethoxylated. It's been ethoxylated so that we can get that beautiful skin feeling, but it also washes off so the skin doesn't feel greasy and that the product still works. We've got some questions coming through. I will get to questions in a moment. As I mentioned, that's why I wanted to have a little bit of a surfactant one-on-one with you first, and definitely stick to one topic because it's a big topic. So here's diagrammatic. Here's a representation of what is a superfatting agent in a formula. Why don't we add oils to our foaming formulas, or why, if we add oils, are they added in tiny quantities? Okay, so the point of a foaming product, the point of a shampoo or a body wash or a face wash, is to remove oil and dirt from the skin. So if I have a high quantity of oil in my formula, I, number one, am making my surfactants work harder in the formula to stabilize that oil. And then they will form what are called micelles around that oil. So that's the big red cross image there. And what we're representing there is the surfactants around this micelle surrounding and trapping the oil in the formula so that it's stable over time. And surfactants will do that. Now, we want this same principle, but we want it to do this for our hair or our skin. So we don't want a lot of oil in our foaming formulas, because if there is a lot of oil in the foaming formulas, number one, the product won't foam as well, because the surfactant is busy stabilizing the oil in the formula rather than an empty golf ball to pick up the dirt and oil from our skin or our hair and then wash it away. We want the empty golf ball at the top of the screen so that it can pick up oil and dirt and wash it away. When you add a lot of oil to your formulas, you end up with the bottom picture, the bottom golf ball, so you don't get the same sort of foam, you don't get the same sort of clean or performance from the product. So if you see a product and it's marketing that it contains a lot of oil and it's a foaming product, check it out. It may not foam very well, or check it out, it may actually be a PEG form of the oil, in which case then it's a superfatting agent and it looks like the top one with the green tick. Or feel the product and see, does it really foam? Or if you've made samples yourself and you've been frustrated because you're adding oils and you're not getting a lot of foam, it would be because what's happening inside your formula looks like that bottom micelle. So what is a superfatting agent? Well, as I've said, one of the good examples is an ethoxylated plant oil. And in that little diagram there, you can see the heads, and these heads are the water-loving portion, and the tails, the little sticks, are the oil-loving portion. And so they all form these micelles, which I've been calling golf balls, and they basically put the oil-loving portion inside, so they're not facing the water. The water is surrounding all of these golf balls, if you like. And when they sit empty like that, they can trap oils and dirt and then wash it away easily. So when we use a superfatting agent, it forms a part of that golf ball shell. When we use straight oil, it goes inside the golf ball and needs to be stabilized by other surfactants in the formula. So a superfatting agent is not a straight oil. A superfatting, and again, these do get called the wrong thing, quite honestly, and it does confuse people when they're new to formulating. The only materials that should be called a superfatting agent are those that have a water-loving and an oil-loving portion. And that is because then they will form the shell of the golf ball and actually enhance the performance of the product and usually enhance the skin feel. They should not be just straight oils. You should not be calling a superfatting agent a straight oil. So again, oils in the formula impact the foam, impact the cleaning performance, and also impact the stability and shelf life. Or they may be used in such tiny amounts, 0.1% or less, where they then don't have a big impact on the formula. There's only one squiggly line inside the golf ball, for example, instead of multiple squiggly lines. So again, that's superfatting agent. This is actually really, really important if you're new to formulating, or even if you are, a properly trained chemist from another industry and you've come over to the cosmetics industry and you hear this term superfatting and you might have been, what is a superfatting agent? How is it different? This is the type of material we call a superfatting agent. So how do we choose surfactants? Little summary for you here. We do have the little tree logo for how natural does it need to be. This can either dramatically impact your selection. You can go from a big library of surfactants you can choose from down to a very slim library of surfactants, depending on how natural or organic you need that formula to be. So definitely that's one of the first considerations that will trim your choices. Cost and availability. Now, these formulas, when you're making a foaming formula, it's interesting because you're using, 20% of active substance in a lot of cases. Depends on the product. Face products not so much, but a high performing shampoo, for example, might use 20% of an active content in the final formula, and the remainder there's 75% or less water. But what's interesting is because by comparison, when you're making an emulsion or a cream, you might have a higher water input and a lower oil and emulsifier input. But what's interesting is because these are wash-off products, consumers don't like to spend as much on a wash-off product as they do on a leave-on product. It's a perception thing. We're never going to change it. The other thing that's interesting is with foaming formulas, they come in much larger package sizes. They tend to be in 200, 250 ml bottles. Whereas if you think about a face cream, it's usually in a 50-gram jar. So basically, we're putting a lot more of materials besides water into a foaming product in a bigger package, and it ends up costing quite a bit to produce. So cost and availability is one of the other big narrowing factors over which surfactants you can choose. Also availability, different parts of the world, depending on whether you're a small producer or a large producer, what surfactants can you actually access, how natural it needs to be, and cost and availability will definitely narrow your library considerably, because for the amount used in a formula and considering the size of the finished product, the formula can become quite expensive. So this is one thing you definitely need to consider at the very, very start of your development. So then you also need to think about different surfactants need different inputs to achieve the required performance. So we can't just say, a blanket statement that, you need the same amount of every single anionic, amphoteric, non-ionic material. It's going to depend on the substance itself, the material itself. For instance, I don't need much sodium lauryl sulfate because it is such a strong cleaner and such a high foaming product. In fact, I don't want too much of it. Otherwise, I might as well go degrease my driveway. So again, that's part of where it got its bad reputation. But even though I'm joking around with it, that is quite true. I don't need much of that material because it's so powerful. Whereas I might be using another anionic surfactant and it doesn't have the same foaming and cleaning performance as sodium lauryl sulfate, I'm going to need more of it to get the same kind of clean or the same type of foam. And then generally it's more expensive. So you can see where the problems come in. In fact, anyone who's ever tried to formulate with these products, I'm sure you're probably sitting there right now going, oh yeah, that's all ringing true. I've found that myself. So again, these are important things to remember. So different surfactants need different inputs. The stronger the material, the less we need for very obvious reasons. And then different materials will come as different strengths or concentrations from different suppliers, and even from the same supplier. So for example, I can get, and again, I'll use sodium lauryl sulfate as an example just because it's so common, but I can get a sodium lauryl sulfate as a 30% concentrate, I can get it as a 70% concentrate, I can get it as a 95% powder. So obviously, this is why we use trade names in our formulas where possible, because we need to be really, really specific about the concentration of the material. And we also then don't need much of the 95% concentrated powder as we would of the 30% solution. The overall active input of the anionic surfactant may be the same in the formula, but the amount of the material in the way it comes to us, either liquid or powder, is very, very different because of its concentration of active content. So again, some of this does start to become a little bit more advanced concepts, but if you watch some of my other free YouTube videos, or definitely when you study with us, we go into this in so much more detail. But this is a bit of a summary of why we use different inputs of surfactants, and also why I definitely specify trade names in my example formulas on YouTube, because if I just put, let's just pick another one. If I just put sodium cocalase ethernate, for example, I can get that as an 85% material. I can get it as a 55% material. So again, if I didn't specify the trade name or its concentration, you could be using the very wrong amount in your formula to get the results you require. So again, these are some of the things that you need to understand. I told you it's a big topic. when making your surfactant selection, definitely look for the active concentration proportion. So now let's have a look at a couple of final summaries, and then I will be opening up for questions. If it's not a sulfate or taurate material, remember I talked about taurates. I love them. They're great in salon quality products, but they're about 10 times the price of sodium lauryl sulfate. So basically, if you're using an anionic surfactant other than a sulfate or a taurate, it's very hard to thicken. You can sometimes, with the right proportions of salt, with the right proportions of cocamidopropyl betaine, you can sometimes thicken a sarcosinate or an isothenate, but again, that's a bit more hit and miss. Using a sulfate or a taurate, you will find it's really easy to thicken these formulas when they're present. It's important that your product doesn't run out of the hand during application. So again, this is very much about having the right viscosity, having that kind of gel form for a consumer so that it's easy for them to use and apply. But also why, especially when you look at my YouTube video, because I do use a lot of naturally derived or partially natural or sometimes totally natural surfactants in a lot of my foaming cleansing formulas, you will see me use a lot of gums. And that's because most of the natural surfactants or naturally derived materials just won't thicken, no matter how much salt you put in there, no matter how much amphoteric material you put in there, they just won't thicken. And again, they're hard to thicken, so you may need to use a gelling agent simply because they won't thicken any other way. Again, when you work with a sulfate or a taurate, your job's pretty easy. They'll thicken really easily, but other surfactants, really difficult to thicken. Now, here's a big one for you. You don't technically need foam to get a good clean. I do get asked this, quite a bit actually. Technically, you don't need foam to clean. You only need enough surfactant present to remove the oil and dirt from the skin or the hair, get the job done. But if you do that, your consumer just doesn't feel like they're getting a good clean. Also, when you do create foam, it provides a really nice skin feel or hair feel, and it helps the product spread really easily. So while you don't need foam, you technically just need just enough surfactant to trap just enough of the oil and dirt present to get your result. But if you don't have a decent amount of foam, your consumer won't be convinced that the product's working, or they'll think it's of lower quality. So I do see companies from time to time come out with a range and they're trying to re-educate the consumer on this point. I've got to say, I don't think you're ever really going to succeed on re-educating a consumer on this aspect, because they feel like if they're not getting foam, they don't feel like it's a quality product. So again, my recommendation is to make sure you've got foam for your consumer. Otherwise, they're not convinced the product's cleaning or is of the required quality when they compare it with another product. And again, you don't need that foam to get the clean, but you do need that foam to make your consumer happy. It must feel good after washout. So don't leave the skin or the hair feeling stripped. And again, one of the great ways that you can overcome this issue is with the non-ionic surfactant selections or different superfatting. Superfatting agents are non-ionic, and so not all of your non-ionic surfactants are superfatting agents, but all of your superfatting agents are non-ionic, and they definitely improve the skin feel or hair feel after wash off. Other elements can be important. Hydrolyzed proteins, actives with wash-off performance. Another question I get a fair bit is, do hydrolyzed proteins actually work in a wash-off product? Yes, certain ones do actually have great substantivity. I've just come out with a video, I think it was just a week or so ago, where I actually show you, or it might be coming out shortly, where's my calendar, where I actually show you substantivity of proteins, hydrolyzed proteins in wash-off products, and I show you they do actually work. But again, you need to check the data, you need to check that substantivity, because I can't say that every single one of them is substantive, but there are loads out there that are substantive. And what do I mean by substantive? That they remain on the hair or the skin after wash off, and they give the benefit that they're promising. So again, in that video, I actually show you data. I actually name several that have this substantivity after wash off and prove that they do actually have a functionality in wash off products. I do want to point out again, salt only thickens certain surfactants. We call these salt responsive surfactants. Again, it's only going to work with some of your anionic surfactants. It's not going to work with all of your anionic surfactants. Works extremely well with sulfates and torates. They are the easiest ones to work with. pH can be important. So when you are formulating with these materials, you'll find a lot of them come quite alkaline. So when you are first combining them in your formula is quite alkaline. And then when you bring the pH down at the end to usually be around, it depends on the materials you're using. Some definitely are not compatible with a pH below 5. A lot of times your formula would be around 5.5 or 6. Again, it depends a bit on which materials you're using, and that will also impact your preservative selection, again, if they're pH dependent. But you'll find that the formula you have when it's first mixed is completely different to the formula that you have when you bring that pH down to 5.5 to 6. And this can be in terms of the way it looks, definitely in terms of its viscosity. You can have a water-thin product when it's first mixed, and then when you bring that pH down, it then becomes a nice gel. And again, this is very, very true with the sulfates and torates. So pH can be important. Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Adjust the pH before you give up on that formula. And again, if you're not using a sulfate or a taurate or a sarcosinate or an isothenate, you're going to probably need some sort of gum or polymer to thicken your product, because just about everything else just won't thicken very well. Again, there's some exceptions and there's some combinations that are exceptions, but as a guide, if you've been frustrated formulating with a glutamate because you can't get it thick, I would say you need a gum, and that's just because of the chemistry of the material. And again here, cationic polymers are okay with anionic surfactants, but not cationic surfactants. What's some examples? So again, we'll use some common inky names that you'd be familiar with. Sodium lauryl sulfate is not at all compatible with something like a cetrimonium chloride or a benhydramonium chloride or a benhydramonium methosulfate. They actually form insoluble complexes, coacevates, and you feel them in the product. It's not desirable. You can't put them together. But you can put cationic polymers with an anionic surfactant. What's some examples? Again, you would recognize these as polyquaternium materials, can go with anionic surfactants very well. And guar hydroxypropyl trimonium chloride is another cationic polymer that is perfectly compatible with anionic surfactants. So again, that's something that a lot of times when people are first starting out, they go, oh, cationic charge is no good with anionic surfactants. That's not technically correct. Cationic surfactants are not compatible with anionic surfactants, but cationic polymers are compatible with anionic surfactants. And in fact, they usually enhance the mildness and the performance of the product. Well, I've talked a lot, and again, that's why I only wanted to have one topic in this presentation. Let's go over to our questions. We have loads of questions. Let's see how far I get. Okay, thanks for your precious time. Thank you for watching. Please suggest a good sulfate-free alternative, as in my experience, nothing cleans well as sulfates. You're absolutely chemically correct. I use sulfates, but my friends asked me to make a sulfate-free shampoo. Again, there's a lot of that misinformation, unfortunately. Look, again, I've mentioned torates, but they are about 10 times the price. I do like sarcosinates. Sarcosinates and isothanates would be my next best pick. Again, isothanates tend to be quite expensive. Sarcosinates are quite mild. They definitely don't have a sulfate performance, but if you were looking for a 3 to 4 times price alternative to a sulfate, then sarcosinate, I would definitely say give them a go. They do feel really nice. They do foam quite well. And they, again, they can thicken a little bit in the right combinations. So definitely they're worth exploring. They are nice to work with. I have a question about Lamisoft PO65. I'd like to use it in a foaming formula, but BASF does not state an active content. That is actually 100% active, and that is a super fatting material. It's a blend. I don't know the inky names off the top of my head, but it is 100% material. I did find on the TDS that it contains around 35% cocoa glucoside, 20% glycerol oleate. Would you say it's 35? No, it's actually 100% active material. So you would tend to use it at around 3% in your formula. Again, budget will determine that, but it is a really nice super fatting material to use. I am confused with polyquats and guars. While guars are positive, catonically charged, but are compatible with anionic, but some quats are in market selling shampoos. How are they compatible? Well, hopefully what I just explained helped you with that. So again, remember, things like your guar hydroxypropyl triammonium chloride and your polyquaterniums are cationic polymers, and these are compatible with anionic surfactants. It's your cationic surfactants, your cetrimonium chloride, benzimonium chloride, methosulfate materials. These are not compatible with anionic surfactants. So hopefully that's really helped you out there. How polyquat can be incorporated into the formula. Should it be diluted with water first or can be directly put into the surfactants? Again, when you're using a polyquaternium as a powder, you would only use a small amount. You only need small amounts of these materials. Otherwise, they do feel very clingy on the hair. They do feel very, and they'll make the hair feel really limp and heavy. But in small amounts, beautiful in your formulas. So you only need a small amount is the point when it's a powder form, and you can just put it straight into water. You can put it in at the end. You could put it in at the start. You know, they'll go into your formulas really easily. Does actives for wash-off products really work? Absolutely, if you have data to support their substantivity and performance in a wash-off product. So what's my examples of that? If I was using an active that's meant to be in a leave-on product and there's absolutely no data to support its use in a wash-off product, well, then it's probably not going to do anything. But there are quite a few actives out there that do have great data to show that they are particularly useful in a wash-off product. So look for that data. As I mentioned, I have my proteins video. It's either just come out or it's about to come out. Please check YouTube. And I do show you examples with actual data that the substantivity and performance of those products is compatible and has been proven in wash-off applications. So definitely look for the data, look for that free video, and you'll see the type of data I'm talking about. And then you definitely know that those actives work in that wash-off product. So yeah, again, you have to look for them, you have to choose them selectively, but yes, you can get actives that work really well in wash-off formulas, but just double check that data to be sure. What happens or could happen if I add too much of a chelating agent, EDTA? Okay, good question, and definitely one that I'll cover briefly. You don't need EDTA in all of your foaming formulas. EDTA will enhance the performance of your preservative, definitely, but it will only be of benefit where you have sulfates are notoriously bad for forming scum in a hard water area. But a lot of your anionic surfactants won't form scum. So you don't need EDTA if you're not using a material that will form scum when it's in a hard water area. So how much would you normally use? Not much either. Tends to be 0.05 to 0.2% in the formula. And again, only where you're using it either to enhance the performance of your preservative, only where it's needed for some other stability reasons. So some actives, for instance, need a chelating agent present, and it's only going to be of benefit where you are working with a surfactant that will form scum in a hard water area. Otherwise, you don't need it, but there's some input guidance, and again, it depends on how much material you're using, how much of that kind of effect you need for your formula. A question about the characterization: is it enough with the contact angle? I'm not sure what you mean there. If you're talking, are you talking about surface, the definition surface active agent and contact angle? I think you might be coming from that perspective. Look, we can talk contact angles till the cows come home, but that doesn't make a great shampoo. Okay, so when you're putting your products together, you will pick materials that provide the functionality and performance you're looking for, rather than having this theoretical discussion about contact angle, because that's not what a consumer is thinking when they're using a product. So again, we're really picking, and like I've said before, you need extra foam to make your consumer happy. They're not happy if you only use the bare minimum of surfactant to get the clean. They need more foam than that. So again, talking contact angles doesn't really have relevance to create a consumer expectation or a product that's going to sell well. So I would say you're better off looking at the classifications. How does that raw material supplier classify it? And again, they will use the terms surfactant because it creates a lot of foam, solubilizer because it's able to solubilize a small amount of oils in a formula, emulsifier because it will form creams and lotions, and superfatting agent because it's a non-ionic material that enhances the skin feel of the skin or hair feel of the product when it's washed off. That is how the classification should be made, not based on contact angle. And the other way that they do classify them too comes down to HLB, that's your hydrophile lipophile balance, and definitely how they perform in the formula. So they're more important to consider. How does an anionic surfactant for glycerin-based soap react? Does it make it mild? Okay, so this is not the kind of discussion we're having today. Today we're really talking about modern surfactants. This question here about glycerin with a soap comes from traditional saponification. Definitely having a higher content in a traditionally saponified product will improve the mildness, but at the end of the day, a traditionally saponified soap to exist, to not split out into a horrible fatty acid layer and water layer look, has to have a pH up around 9.5 to 10 or over 10. So regardless of how much extra glycerin you put in there to improve the mildness, you're still talking about a very alkaline product. So traditional soaps, as popular as they can be in some regions, when you're using a traditional saponification process, your end product, regardless of how you got there, it will always have that pH up around 10, which is not at all skin compatible. So, look, if you really want a traditionally saponified product, then definitely add the extra glycerin. It's going to help. But really, when we're talking about mildness and when we're talking about consumer aesthetics and acceptance of their products, we are talking about your modern surfactants where your final pH is around generally 6, which you can't do. You just cannot achieve with a traditionally saponified product because otherwise it splits out into its fatty acid components and that does not look good. If you've ever seen that happen, it looks like a big fluffy fatty layer on top of a water layer, and consumers just aren't going to use that type of product because they think there's a quality problem. So I hope that helps out as well. What are your thoughts on soap nuts being used as surfactants? So I think there you're probably talking about saponins, like naturally occurring saponins in materials. Look, if that's all we had, if we were back in the caveman days and that's all we had, then absolutely, they're definitely better than a traditional saponified product. And that's just because of the pH factor. But they don't give the foam profile that someone's looking for. They definitely don't give the performance, and definitely they cost a lot more to produce. So again, a commercially produced material is going to win out for its performance, for its aesthetics. And it doesn't mean you can't put some of these materials in combination with your other surfactants in a formula, and it's great for the product story. But get some in and try them, and you're going to see what I'm talking about. They just don't perform in any way or any sort of comparison to the materials that I've talked about in this presentation. Where would sulfonated alcohol polyglucosides like sodium lauryl glycosides, hydroxypyryl sulfonate stand as compared to the rest of the anionic families? Again, that's an anionic material. Actually, I do use this. If you go to my YouTube channel, I actually have this. I think I used it now don't quote me on this, definitely search the YouTube channel. I think I used this in a tear-free shampoo. It's very mild is the point. Definitely, if you got that and if you paired it with hydroxysultane and then another non-ionic material, you've got yourself a baby product for sure. Very, very mild, very nice material to work with. Again, thickening may be a bit of an issue, but in terms of the way it feels, absolutely beautiful. Just check cost as well. I don't know how that cost compares off the top of my head. Sorry, can't remember everything. Is it necessary to add superfatting agent to your surfactant formula? Technically, no. And when you're looking, one of the things, this is actually reminds me of a discussion I had with someone starting out, and they were like, why do hotel products feel so bad? Because they're so budget conscious, and a lot of your cheaper hotel products, the little mini bottles you get in your hotel, and you feel them, and you're like, oh, these are terrible. When you stay in a more luxury hotel, you get nicer products. But one of the reasons those budget products feel so bad is they are quite literally, sodium lauryl sulfate and cocamide propylbutane, and then the tiniest amounts used, less than you would normally use, just to keep the cost down. So, we're talking bare bones to make a bubble. So do we need a superfatting agent? No. Will the feel of your product benefit from it? Absolutely. So where the budget allows it, get a superfatting agent in that formula. They're a great addition, but yes, it then comes down to a bit of a cost factor. So yeah, use them where your budget allows, because it really does enhance the feeling. And if you're ever in doubt, or if you ever want to explore this, then make some samples with and without and feel them, and you'll feel the difference for yourself. And then you definitely understand why I'm saying, look, where you can, use them. What are your thoughts about amino acid-based surfactants? This is something like your sodium lauryl sarcosinate. So definitely, I do like them. I did a video, I can't remember what it was called, but it was with some apple amino acids as well. And oh my goodness, that felt just absolutely sublime. So I do like the protein-based type surfactants. Like your sarcosinates, or this was an apple amino acid. And there's quite a few now, actually. This is one of the areas where surfactant manufacturers are being quite innovative, and the products do feel beautiful. They do foam quite well. They cost more, obviously, but yes, definitely, if you can get some, if you want to try them out, I definitely recommend it where your budget allows, because they do feel really, really nice. They foam really well. They clean really well. You know, again, they're kind of your closest budget comparison to a sulfate, but you really can't put them on the same budget page. But definitely explore them. They are really, really nice. I noticed that many manufacturers first form the gel network before adding the surfactants one by one in their sample formulations. I saw this also for Amaze XT polymer. What are your thoughts? Again, if you watch my videos, I don't tend to do it that way, because you really need to have, it depends on the gelling agent, actually. I should qualify that. Now, if you're using a natural gelling agent, something like a xanthan gum, for example, where it gels straight away, then you need to be very careful, because if you mix your gelling agent with your water phase, and then let's say you're adding, a 30% active cocamidopropyl betaine, and let's say you're adding, even 3% active of that is still a 10% addition of a liquid substance, and then you might be adding another 6% active of your sodium lauryl sarcosinate, which again would be like adding, 18 to 20% liquid material. So we've got 30% liquid material here. Again, the active content's not that, but the water content's certainly adding up. So if you think about it, I've got, say, 30% of liquid material. If I add that to a gelled water phase with a natural gelling agent that basically thickens straight away, once that natural material forms its gel, that's it. It's done its gel job, and it won't necessarily want to pick up the extra water from your surfactant addition later. Now, again, if I've kind of lost you on that, this is because it's a live short presentation, but I do have this in my natural surfactants videos, and I've got several natural surfactant videos where you see me actually combining the surfactants with the water phase first, and I do that so that all available water is present, so that when I add my gelling agent is able to swell in the presence of all of the available water. Again, if you see a manufacturer do it another way, it could be because of the gelling agent they're using. It could be because of the equipment or processing steps that they're using. And definitely, if you make it in the lab and you find you don't get phase separation from that process, then that's fine. But the reason why I tend to combine the liquid surfactants with the water first is so that my gelling agent, and again, I'm tending, when you're using a natural surfactant, you want a natural gelling agent. And if you're using a natural gelling agent that gels straight away, you need to put that in after all of your available water is present. Otherwise, you can find that you'll end up getting this gel layer in this water layer. And that's just because the gelling agent's gelled. And once it's gelled, if you add extra water to it, it just can't handle it. Now, again, that doesn't apply to all natural surfactants. That doesn't apply to all natural gelling agents, but there's quite a few, and xanthan gum's, quite notorious for it, where that can happen. Also, because when you're adding, say, xanthan gum to water first, and then you add your alkaline surfactants to that gelled water phase, you get that phase separation because the xanthan gum's already swelled when it was in a slightly acidic environment, and then it's been turned alkaline. So it doesn't want to swell in an alkaline environment. So it can be significant problems if you gel your water first. My recommendation to you is try it in the lab. And if that sample works, definitely check it out when you go to a large lab batch before you go to a full pilot batch. If you start to see that you're getting a separated jelly layer, that is why. And that is why I tend to add it later, just to avoid the potential issue. And if I have my gelling agent added at the end when all available water is present, you don't have the problem. You do have to make sure you don't introduce too much air into your formula, otherwise your gelling agent is going to trap the air and you'll just end up with a vat full of bubbles. So, there's pros and cons, but definitely check it out. Now, some of your synthetic polymers or some of your low swelling gels, like sclerotium gum would be an example, it won't have this problem. You could put that in at the start because remember, sclerotium gum needs significant time to swell. So if I put that in with water at the start and then I add my surfactants containing water later, it's going to take its time to swell. It's okay because by then all of the available water is present, so I don't have the problem. But something that's a rapid gelling material like xanthan gum is prone to having this issue because it will gel with what available water present. You add more available water later and it just doesn't want to gel with it, and then you end up with a jelly separate water layer as well. So yeah, definitely, do prove or disprove with the particular materials you're using in the lab with your sample. But that is why, I generally recommend to do it the other way because then it won't happen. I love using sodium methyl cocoa taurate too, absolutely. But would it thicken with salt? Yes, it thickens really well, really, really well. Oh, in case you're wondering, why do these materials thicken well with salt? Again, I have a video on YouTube. Search for it, and I've got some great diagrams that show you why salt helps sulfate and taurates thicken, and it's to do with their chemistry. So again, you can watch that video after if you want to see, well, how does salt thicken? How does it work? I have a video on that for you. Would you need to use a gum or gelling agent like hydroxypropyl methyl cellulose? Not normally with a taurate. Again, it's going to be input dependent, but not normally. Would adding too much salt to get the desired viscosity affect the performance or overall feel of the final product? Yes, you get to a point where too much salt, even with a sulfate or a taurate, and it's too much salt and it will irreversibly thin the product and you can't save it. And again, please watch my video where I talk about how salt thickens, and that explains why that happens. But yes, too much of a good thing is not a good thing. So again, taurates, I do find them very easy to work with. Have a look at your input ratios of your taurate with your cocamide or propylbutane, for example, because it does thicken pretty easily. But again, cost is a big factor with that one. For a no-tear baby wash product, should we formulate to the usual skin-compatible pH 5.5, or do we need to raise pH to more neutral? You usually do need it to be around 6 or a little higher, so it's a little bit more tear-friendly. And again, I do have a video making a tear-free baby shampoo where I also show you combinations of surfactants that provide that tear-free effect. Now, if you wanted to claim tear-free, remember, you do need to hold the evidence. So if you want to put tear-free on your product, it's not just about the theoretical combination of your surfactants that's important. That's obviously important. It's not just about the pH. That's obviously important. If you're going to say tear-free for your product, you must hold evidence. So you'd need to go to a lab that can conduct the testing for tear-free, and you must hold that evidence if you want to claim your product is tear-free. So again, it's not just pH, it's not just combinations. You've got to hold the evidence as well before you can make that claim. Are there any EcoCert type non-PEG superfatting agents you can recommend? Yes, there are. The Lamisoft PO65 that I mentioned earlier is one. There are some Tegosoft materials from Evonik. I actually love the Tegosoft materials. I've used them. Again, have a look for some of our natural surfactants on YouTube. And you will see me use them in those formulas. Off the top of my head, I can't think of the exact grades, but I do know they're Tegosoft. Oh, yeah, I can't think of the full trade name, but they're definitely in there. There's others as well. Definitely explore them. There are more and more choices. I would say going back 10 years ago, there was hardly any choices. Now we've got more and more choices, which is great. Is Cocamide DEA safe to use in shampoo, and what's the alternatives? Okay, so this is really good to thicken products. It is safe when its amine content is within regulations. Again, this is a material that has become regulated to ensure safe use by consumers. So you would need to check the regulations for that amine content, tertiary amine content. It is tightly regulated, and then you would need to check with your supplier that they have done those tests and can provide you with that documentation to make sure that their tertiary amine content is below the regulatory limits, and then it's perfectly safe to use. It does help your products thicken quite well, actually. So, and it is quite nice. But again, look for one that can actually make sure the supplier can actually provide you with those tertiary amine content to make sure you're A, within regulations, and B, the product is safe. How to choose surfactant for suspending? For example, jojoba beads and pumice in a body wash. Yeah, can't seem to find on that. Okay, so look, when you're trying to suspend particles, especially pumice is really heavy. You would need to choose your rheology modifier very carefully to suspend it. Your surfactants aren't able to do it on their own. You need to use certain gelling agents that can do that. When you're using something light like a jojoba bead, the risk you run is it will rise to the surface and float. The pumice, it'll fall to the bottom. It's quite heavy. I have got videos on this. I've actually got a video where I show you different natural gelling agents and their impact on suspending particles. And then I also have a video where I show you, and again, this is the hardest type of formula to stabilize heavy particles in. So I have a video that, again, these are all free on YouTube. It's called, I did it with quartz. If you search for quartz, you would find a surfactant formula where I stabilize it using a vegan material. And that's just about the only thing that's going to stabilize your pumice because it's so heavy. And I used quartz in that formula because it's so heavy as an exfoliant. So same principles would apply for your pumice. When formulating a salicylic acid cleanser, would you still be able to use SLES, or would you be limited with your choice of surfactants to keep your pH low to maintain bioavailability of the acid? SLES and other anionic surfactants, a lot of them come as alkaline solutions, but that doesn't mean they can't be in an acid environment. When you're formulating something like a salicylic acid cleanser, while it is on the milder spectrum for an exfoliating agent, a chemical exfoliant, I would actually probably use something a bit more mild. Now, you can't use your sarcosonates in this example because sarcosonates don't like a pH below 5. So you would need to pick a surfactant material that is naturally a bit more mild and can handle a low pH. This might be an example where you wouldn't want a huge amount of foam. I do have a salicylic acid cleansing scrub on YouTube as well, and I use materials there where I can maintain quite a low pH and stabilize it. So that's an example you might want to have a look at. Choose your surfactants well. Make sure they can handle that acidic environment. SLES can. SLES is milder than SLS, still performs in quite a similar way. You might want to use a small input of that. I would definitely be using some amphoteric materials, and that would be to improve the mildness, and they can handle that acidity. Just want to say that these lives are brilliant. Thank you for watching. Thank you so much for holding them. It's fantastic to be able to rewatch them over or watch the ones we can't attend for whatever reason when live. Thank you for commenting. That's lovely. Is SLS accepted in face wash, or is it too harsh? No, it's perfectly fine. Again, you can, if you're combining SLS with amphoteric and non-ionic materials, it's mild enough to use in baby products. And again, this is actually a good point, something I should mention. So when you're making a face product, you would use a very low input of surfactants compared to when you're using, say, the opposite extreme, an oily hair shampoo. In an oily hair shampoo, you're talking about a lot of surface area you've got to clean off of all the individual hair strands. So you tend to have a higher input in general of all of your surfactants because you need a lot more performance out of them. With a face wash product, you tend to use the low side of the input that you would use. And this is also why you might see suppliers recommend a big range of surfactant input, because it depends what you're using it in. So a hand and body wash is going to be somewhere in the middle. An oily shampoo is the really, maximum input you'd want to use, and a face wash is usually the minimum. And again, it's got to do with the way it feels. It's got to do with the amount of foam you need. You don't need a lot of foam in a face wash product to be satisfied that it's doing the job and that it feels nice. And again, performance. You're not usually removing as much oil from your face as you are from an oily hair, like where there's a lot of hair and a lot of oil around every single hair. You need a lot of performance there. We are going to wrap up shortly. I've just got a couple more questions here. What is a superfatting agent you would recommend? Again, I wish I could think of the exact Tegosoft. I do love the Tegosofts. I do also love like PEG 60 amylglycerides, PEG 7 cocoate. I don't think that's the full inky. I'm trying to think of those materials, those ethoxylated materials, and whereas ethoxylated with a natural oil gives a beautiful product story, also feels really nice, also usually quite economical additions. If you don't want to use ethoxylated materials, check out the Tegosoft range. There are some non-ethoxylated and natural materials in that Tegosoft range that also feel absolutely beautiful and go into your formulas so easy. Here we are. Tegosoft LSE 65K off the top of my head is one. And there's others that have similar trade names to that. I'm surprising myself at 5 p.m. At the end of the day that I recalled that for you. But definitely check out the Tegosoft range. There's some great materials. And final question, how could a gel face wash formula be turned into a white paste? Glycol stearate, yes, that will make it pearly. You may also see a small amount of a non-ionic emulsifier, even like something like a cetyl alcohol get used if you don't want the pearl look. Again, if you did want a pearl look, but not using glycol stearate, so you wanted a more natural way. I actually have a video, I can't remember the name of it, and I show you actually use some cetyl alcohol, small amount only, otherwise it can really impact the viscosity of your formula. Just a small amount just to give it white look, and then I put some sparkle mica in there, and the overall impact or the combination of these two, the sparkle mica is doing nothing other than the appearance, but it made it look pearly without using glycol stearate. So there's another little tip. And like I said, I can't remember what that video is called, but I definitely have it in the YouTube video library for you. If you type in surfactant in the search bar in the channel, you'll see there's a lot of different videos, or you might look face wash or body wash, loads of titles in there. So thank you everyone for being here today, and I look forward to seeing you next month for more live presentations. I'm really enjoying this opportunity to interact with you like this and provide you with some answers live, and I hope you're finding this information useful. Oh, just a little note, if you haven't already checked it out, check out our free Cosmetic Formulation Fundamentals Masterclass. Absolutely free. We have 6 hours of lecture content, 50-page booklet, 15 lectures, and it's really designed to get you started right. So if you're really at the beginner stage, or you've been exploring, or you've done some other short courses, again, there is some misinformation out there. So I created this masterclass to make sure I'm giving you some really strong fundamentals with some really great background information, so that you get a really good foundation of learning from. You can either stay there, or if you want to start learning more professionally later, at least you're starting with a really good baseline. I do have some final FAQs that we have about studying with us. You can definitely have a read of them later. But thank you again for attending this presentation on how to choose surfactants. I hope you've learned a lot in such a short period of time. And again, if you do want to learn more professionally, then please contact us, info@personalcarescience.com.au. We are happy to train you, because this is what we love to do. So over to you now. Happy formulating.